Good people, welcome into the Basketball Society podcast. This is Martin Soaries. We're about to do an NBA Spectrum episode. So this is the first Spectrum update of the season. I did my first ever NBA Spectrum episode a little over a month ago in October, right at the start of the NBA season. So this is where I put all 30 NBA teams in some respective categories of where I see them right now and their trajectory for the season. Before we get started, make sure you are subscribed to the Basketball Society podcast wherever you're listening from. We're on YouTube and on Apple Podcasts. All of the podcast episodes go up on the YouTube. You can leave comments on those videos. I always reply to the comments. I'm the only one running that channel. So if someone replies, it's going to be me. So if you want to tap in with me, critique something, disagree with something I have to say, whatever the case, feel free to hit the YouTube channel, Basketball Society, and you can leave comments on these videos, and that's where you can kind of engage with me more directly. Speaking of engaging with me directly, you can follow me on social media on Instagram at martin.soaries, on Twitter at marsoaries, and make sure you follow Basketball Society on Instagram at Basketball Society _. So let's get into the Spectrum. There's been some movement. Let me get this out of the way too, because this is important to know about this NBA Spectrum process and model. These are not tiers. There are certain teams, for instance, that I may still have as a championship contender. Right now I have 6 contenders on my list. I took one out from the first episode. I took one team out of my championship contenders, and I'll talk about that. So I have 6 now. These 6 teams that I have as contenders are not necessarily the top teams in the standings right now. Like the Orlando Magic are second in the East right now. You know, the Timberwolves are number 1 in the West right now. So try not to think of this as like just completely linear tiers, because there are certain teams with better records that I may not have, you know, as a championship contender or as a fringe contender. They may have a better record than a team that I have as a contender or a fringe contender right now. That's just, you know, it's not that linear. It's not that straightforward to say tiers. So I think that'll become a little more clear as I get into this. So for my championship contenders right now, I've got Nuggets, Lakers, Bucks, Celtics, Heat, Suns. The only team I took out as a championship contender, and I just moved them down to fringe contender, is the Warriors. It's still very much about Steph, Clay, Draymond, maybe to a fault, but they're going to ride that thing until the wheels fall off. The Warriors are going to keep figuring things out. I don't see myself putting them any lower than like a fringe contender. They could easily be a contender for me. It's just that they do look just very beatable. They look pretty limited, and I don't think we've seen. We've seen flashes. Like they can win some games. Like they know how to, again, Chris Paul, they're going to win some games. But when you watch them, they do look, you know, step slow. They don't look like they have the same pop. Just based on where the Warriors are right now, I'm keeping them as a fringe contender. The Mavericks moved into this category. Well, everyone except the Kings moved into this category, and the Warriors were the only team that I had as championship contender that moved to fringe contender. Everyone else moved up. Sacramento, Minnesota, Oklahoma City, those 3 in particular. Those 3 feel like the weirdest trio of competitive Western Conference teams right now, because they're young, they have young upcoming stars, and none of them really seem championship ready yet. None of them have been there yet, but they're all so promising and competitive and talented. Sacramento, Oklahoma City, and Minnesota. Minnesota is having like the year kind of like Sacramento had last year, it feels like. Minnesota's number 1 in the West. So the Timberwolves in November, by the way, they went 13-2, which according to stats accounts that I saw on Twitter reporting this, apparently the Timberwolves going 13-2 in November was the greatest Minnesota-based record ever in a single month. So that's NBA, MLB, or NHL. So the Timberwolves just had the best month in Minnesota sports history by going 13-2. We know, obviously, Anthony Edwards is looking like a star, but it's really, and I have a breakdown video of Anthony Edwards coming out on the channel if it's not up already. Probably not up yet, but it will be soon. Anthony Edwards, he's been averaging 26, 5, and 5, looking like the best shooting guard in the league. It's between him and Devin Booker. I kept saying this about Minnesota the last couple years because people kept getting higher and higher on Anthony Edwards. And I just kept saying, look, as long as they are going to embrace him as their best player, because everyone kept, leaping to Michael Jordan and saying and loving his progression. I'm like, well, Karl Anthony Towns has been the guy for them. He was their number one pick before Anthony Edwards. He's kind of been the centerpiece, and he's a very skilled player. He's someone you can play through, and they've tried to play through. The first thing I wanted to make sure was that, okay, well, let's make sure the team, the franchise, Karl Anthony Towns, all of the above, let's make sure that they are going to start acting like this is Anthony Edwards' team. And that's what they're doing right now. When you watch them, it's clear. When you watch a team, it should be clear who the best player is, not just by who's doing the most or scoring the most points or who looks the best, but like it also matters how that player's teammates react to them. Being the best player isn't just about scoring the most points or being the most talented. Like when you're the best player, it means that the team, the program, the parents, the fans, we know who their best player is, right? Some teams don't like to say, or some teams may not necessarily have like one best player. Different players can kind of show up and be their best player in different games. But when you have a team like the Timberwolves, give the team to Anthony Edwards. And that's what's happened now. When you watch them, he is in control of the team. He's a willing passer. He's getting guys involved, making extra passes, giving up a good shot for him for a great shot for somebody else. He's doing those things. So he's not just scoring the ball and being a great athlete and a great specimen. He's being a great basketball player, and he's instilling confidence in other guys. From what I've seen, it looks like guys are playing well because their best player, who they're now like, they operate as if he's their best player. Now that they have that, other guys seem to kind of be falling in line. Ant and Cat are their big two. That's their star duo, right? They've been all stars. They're star level, high level talents. That's their star duo as far as talent. As far as like their core of what makes them who they are, it's a big three of Ant, Cat, and Rudy Gobert. I thought the whole two big lineup thing was antiquated and done, but when you have a player like Anthony Edwards, a shooting guard, a true scorer and force, who's also playing unselfish and making willing passes and getting other guys involved, I feel like it makes it easier for guys to fall in line, play their role, and contribute to winning, and they're winning games. By the way, Minnesota has other really good players. Mike Conley as your point guard. They've had Jaden McDaniels playing really well, knocking down threes for them on the wing at the small forward spot. You still got Naz Reid off the bench. Like they have players. You've solidified Ant as the guy, the main player. He has that freedom and that green light. Anytime you have one of the top players at their position in the league, you should be in some kind of position to compete for something, right? So right now I have him as a fringe contender, but I mean, that's really good for them to me. I don't know what championship contender Minnesota would look like, but this is the closest I've seen so far. So I've got OKC as a fringe contender. I moved them up from competitive Thorn. Maybe they get stronger and just better and more confident. They start like they have some good wins, but as we go later into the season, they start building up some more critical late in the season, late game wins against quality teams, right? Like if they keep proving it to us and keep winning certain games and doing things the right way, I could see them as a championship contender. I feel like OKC is going to stick around the fringe contender area for me just because I don't know. I don't know if I can go all the way there with them. But out of the three, Sacramento, OKC, Minnesota, it's interesting. I think OKC has the best roster. Minnesota has the best individual player. They each have stars. De'Aaron Fox is a star. Shea is a star, and OKC, they may have a couple stars realistically, and Anthony Edwards is a star. Karl Anthony Towns is a star. Each of these teams have stars. They're all small market. Sacramento out of those three, see, Sacramento is the furthest along because they battled with Golden State all the way to Game 7 last year. Like I said, Minnesota's kind of having the year it looks like that Sacramento had last year. Sacramento was number 1 in the West. It's going to be interesting to see, especially with those three teams, the Kings, Thunder, and Timberwolves, who separates themselves. Because it's like they're all here, and for me, they're all fringe contenders. So my last fringe contender, I had Dallas as a competitive thorn before, and I've moved them up. So early on, it became clear that Derek Lively changes the dynamic for the Dallas Mavericks. The fact that they have a legitimate rim running, rim protecting big who can catch, who can finish, who's a great screen setter. From the little I've seen with him on the floor, and I know he's been hurt for a little bit, but that he's huge for them. I know we focus a lot on Luka and Kyrie with Dallas because that is their talent core. But man, Dallas to me is the team that, other than Phoenix at fully healthy, Dallas can get the hottest of any team. When you look at their roster, they have flamethrowers. They have legit scorers, and that's outside of Kyrie and Luka. I'm talking about in addition to Kyrie and Luka. When you have guys like Tim Hardaway Jr. and Josh Green, Jaden Hardy, and they still have Seth Curry on their roster. I don't know what's going on with his minutes or his health, but it doesn't seem like he's been playing much. But they have gunners on their roster. The Mavericks do. They have real gunners in addition to Luka and Kyrie. Also, I failed to mention the pickup of Grant Williams in my first Spectrum episode talking about Dallas. That was a great pickup. I really see Dallas as like the scariest team that could get hot, kind of like they did a couple years ago when they went to the conference finals, or maybe that was last year against the Warriors in the conference finals. They can get hot, man. So let's go into competitive thorns. All right. So I've got Sixers, Pacers, Cavaliers, Knicks, and Rockets. Competitive thorn, like it's an analogy, it's a metaphor to like the thorn in your side, right? So I tend to describe certain teams as like they're a thorn in the side of the Eastern Conference. The New York Knicks, great example, because Jalen Brunson, he's been on he's playing the best basketball of his life right now, averaging 25 points a game, 5 assists, 3 rebounds, shooting 48% on threes, and shooting 7 threes a game, but shooting 48% from 3. That's Jalen Brunson right now. They're going to be super competitive. They're in a really interesting spot because they have legitimate talent. Now they've established more of a culture with the kind of players they have and the way that they play. They're dynamic. They can score. They can defend. They're tough. They're gritty. Like, this is kind of what you want from a Knicks team. Really, the only thing they're missing is a legitimate superstar. But it's cool because they have star. Like, Jalen Brunson's got to be an all-star this year. He's a star. Julius Randle has been an all-star. I wonder if Knicks fans like better having a team like they have now, which is really good. I don't know if anyone is thinking they're championship good. I don't have them as a contender or a fringe contender. I think they're a competitive thorn, which is a playoff team that could upset a higher seeded team, or at the very least take them to 6 or 7 games and just be like that thorn in their side where it's like you have to beat them. But I wonder if Knicks fans would rather have the team they have now or like the team with Carmelo Anthony and J.R. Smith. Going into games against the Miami Heat with LeBron and D Wade, like, I'm sure you had to feel more comfortable having Carmelo on your side, right? Like Carmelo and Amari Stoudemire. Like, when you're going up against teams with stars, I feel more comfortable when my team has stars to counter that. And the way the league is different now, again, it's a little more spread out. No super teams, no like heavy hitter, top heavy teams that it's like, oh, there's no way we can beat them. But again, I just wonder, because it's like when the Knicks today, when the Knicks go against the Celtics or the Bucks, again, I know they can play with them. Same thing with the Pacers. Like, I feel they can play with them because they have good system, good culture, good players, good roster, good depth. But we know when it comes down to it, especially in the playoffs and in those big games, it's about your stars. The Sixers have moved up, and again, these aren't necessarily tiers, but to go from identity crisis, which is where I had the Sixers, because during this first episode, they still had James Harden on their roster. And they've since, dealt with that, gotten rid of him. And now Tyrese Maxey is the lead guy at guard. I really don't know what to make of the Sixers yet. But right now, I love Tyrese Maxey. I love that he's getting the opportunity now. Your two best players are Joel Embiid and Tyrese Maxey. This is Maxey's first time in the driver's seat as a lead guard. And while he's put up a 50 ball and he's doing some really great things, playing well, it looks like Nick Nurse is really helping to unlock him now. Maxey hasn't been to the big game yet. He hasn't been there yet. And the Sixers roster is not built such. This is what I said when Harden and Embiid were the duo. Harden still, that lead guard has got to be an elite guard who's ready to go up against and take out the other great lead guards who have better rosters than you. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander has a better roster than Tyrese Maxey has. Oklahoma City's a better roster than Philadelphia. Jamal Murray has a better roster in Denver than Tyrese Maxey has in Philadelphia. De'Aaron Fox has a better roster in Sacramento. So Tyrese Maxey would have to be so good, so great even, to make Philly like a championship contender, because like he's playing with an MVP level big man. And while again, they're playing really well together, and I love the activity they're getting with Maxey as the lead guard. But it's just like, this is his first crack at it. And their roster is not deep enough and built enough to compensate for if Maxey, drops off and maybe scores under 20 points or has a single digit scoring game or just isn't in rhythm and doesn't have it. And he's making the most out of his opportunities. But between his inexperience and the limited roster of Philly, I don't see the Sixers as any more than a competitive thorn right now. I think they can make noise. They're showing they can score high points. I mean, I think offensively they look better than they've ever looked with Doc Rivers. And they looked good, really good at times. But it looks like Nick Nurse has the Sixers humming offensively more than we ever saw them with Doc Rivers. I said I love the Pacers. They haven't moved. I had them as a competitive thorn in my opening episode. Similar to other teams. Like these teams have very similar thing in common. Except for the Sixers, who do have a superstar, obviously, an MVP level, but it's more about their roster. These other teams, like the Pacers, really good roster, no superstar. The Knicks, really good roster, no superstar. The Pacers have the hottest player in the league right now in Tyrese Halliburton. He's the hottest player in the league. In November, he actually put up historic stats in November. Tyrese Halliburton, 28.6 points a game, 11.7 assists per game, 53% shooting from the field, 47% shooting from three. Only Michael Jordan in 1989 and LeBron James, who did it in 2017 and 2018, ever averaged 25 and 10 with 50 and 40% shooting in a month. So that's at least 50% shooting from the field, at least 40% shooting from three. As much as I love Tyrese Halliburton and how much as special as I know he is, and as much as I love the Pacers roster, I love their depth. Listen, they've got 8 guys averaging double figures. The Pacers have 8 players averaging double figures right now. They're deep. And, Indiana has 1 star in Tyrese Halliburton who's playing extremely well. I don't know if he can play so well to make them a contender. Not to say he's doing it by himself. He's clearly not. He's got 7 other guys averaging double figures. The Pacers are leading the league in scoring right now. They average 128 points a game. And that is not because of star talent other than, again, Tyrese Halliburton. Miles Turner is a really good player. Buddy Hield, really good player. It's more so about their depth and their style of play. And it's Tyrese Halliburton at the point of attack, obviously, who really initiates and establishes their culture, but it's their roster. It's their depth, right? It's not because they're the best or most skilled offensive team in the league. It's because they've bought in. They have different guys who can shoot, who can score, who can make plays, and they're buying into their system, and they're buying into their best player who makes it all happen in Tyrese Halliburton. So I like the Pacers a lot. There's a lot to like about them. They're leading the league in scoring, 128 points a game. Guys, the Hawks are second in scoring right now in the league. So we can't put too much stock right now into scoring leaders and things like that. It's still early, but a really good early sign for the Pacers, who I'm keeping at competitive Thorns for now. And to me, that's a lot of respect. And that's the most I can give them for now. I think it kind of goes without saying. The Cavaliers, just the Cavaliers. Like, they've got one really good player, star player, Donovan Mitchell. Max Strus has done really well for them. I had said that Max Strus won't single-handedly change the trajectory and dynamics of their team, but it kind of looks like that's what's been happening. It really, I mean, we knew they needed a shooting threat on the outside. He needed more shooting, but like Max Strus, he's dunking on people. He's playing really well for them. I've got the Rockets as a competitive thorn. They've started 8-8, which I think is pretty good for them based on how they were last year. I talked on the show about how I feel like they're really fascinating because of Ime Udoka being their head coach. We see what Şengün can do. He can be a special big man. They're calling him Baby Jokic. Not too much experience, but again, that's where I look at coaching and I see how much can Ime Udoka kind of fast track them and prepare them to become a playoff team, which is what I think they'll be. I think they should be one of the lower seeded Western Conference playoff teams when we get there. I think they have the roster and the coaching, and I think it's safe to say that they've kind of started a nice little progression into a legitimate team. Sneaky potential. These are teams that could be playoff teams that could exceed expectations. So Brooklyn was in this category and they stayed. Orlando was in this category and they stayed. I've moved the Pelicans up to sneaky potential. I had them down in identity crisis in the first episode to start the season, just because Zion, question marks. Brandon Ingram is doing great. Love CJ McCollum for them, but Zion and his health and his consistency and all that was a big question mark for me coming in. So that's why I had them under identity crisis. But right now, Zion had a stretch of games. He went 26-4-6, 26-3-5, 25-5-6, 32-6-5, 26-3-6, 33-8-6. Like, Zion is hooping right now. I think they have sneaky potential. If they have CJ McCollum, Brandon Ingram, and a healthy and engaged Zion Williamson, that's a team with sneaky potential. Early on, Jordan Dawkins has been lighting it up for the Pelicans as a rookie, and frankly, he looks like one of the best shooters in the league already. And to me, that's a reason why. It's not like the Pelicans are doing anything crazy or groundbreaking right now, but Jordan Dawkins has given the Pelicans another element of spacing and gravity that gives them even more potential. So with Zion playing well and healthy and engaged, and again, I think people need to remember how forceful and how challenging Zion Williamson is as a basketball player. Zion has real basketball IQ. You really see how he affects the game. Again, not just from a power standpoint, because he is so strong and forceful. He also makes plays with the basketball. He also finds guys. He looks for guys. He sees the floor. He's really a special player. So when you have at least one special player, which, Brandon Ingram has a little special in him too, that gives them potential. So the Pelicans to me have sneaky potential. I still have Brooklyn in sneaky potential. They're probably going to hover around there. Again, one of those kind of like jumbo rosters. They're kind of deep. Who knows what is even going on with Cam Thomas? Like, are they starting him? Are they investing in him? Are they like, what? He can't just keep coming off the bench and getting 25 and 30 and cooking people. And we all just keep saying how underrated and underappreciated he is. Like, I don't even know what's going on there, but things were kind of looking up for them kind of early on. Maybe they could compete a little bit more with a healthy Ben Simmons. I have just enough respect for Mikal Bridges. And I still think they have some decent players. I think they can, I think they can win some games and shake things up, but I mean, I don't see the Nets going anywhere fast. I do think they're in danger of being in the identity crisis pretty soon. And the Orlando Magic. So Orlando, an example of a team, started out hot, maybe the hottest start in the league. They've won like 8 in a row, I'm pretty sure, up to this point. They're in second place in the East, and I have them in sneaky potential. Just because they're second in the East doesn't mean that I have to consider them one of the top teams in the league. I guess on paper, they're one of the top teams in the league, but that doesn't mean I have to put them as a championship contender on my spectrum. And I'm not going to unless I really see that in them. I like their roster. I like who they have, and I like that they're finding, some good rhythm. They deserve to, because they have really good players skill players, really strong skill players at different positions. I'm glad to see Orlando playing well. I felt like they could play well if they started to put things together on both ends of the ball. They have a couple good bigs, Jalen Suggs and Cole Anthony, playing really well for them. I feel like they're finally like deciding on and establishing what their identity at guard is and is going to be. Still think they would need to invest in a legitimate, somewhat high level shooting guard or wing player to really take them to the next level. But for now, I love what they have, and I think they have sneaky potential, because I think they'll be a playoff team. Like, I wouldn't make them a competitive Thorn until I see them keep this up, really win some gritty games, and really show that this is who they are. The only team I have in low-key fascinating right now is the Spurs. Victor Wembanyama keeps them fascinating. Even their other players. Like, it's a constant experiment of seeing what's Wemby going to do tonight. It's like an experiment. Like, I don't expect much of them either way. We know they're not going to win games, but we know they're going to stay interesting and fascinating, because it's not just the number one pick. It's Wemby. Like, it's just fascinating every time you watch him play. So the Spurs might be an automatic lock for low-key fascinating all season, unless something changes. We'll see. I'll just give you my 3 teams that are in the doldrums right now: Hornets, Jazz, and Wizards. Yeah, the Wizards are a mess. I thought they might be a little fun to watch. I thought people were excited about the pool party. I thought we might see him turn up a little bit, but kind of a rude awakening, I think for Jordan Poole in Washington. Charlotte sucks that LaMelo Ball just got hurt. So yeah, Hornets, Jazz, Wizards, they're in the doldrums. Irrelevant, won't be in the playoffs. Not much to say there. Identity crisis is the category that loaded up. We've got the most teams right now in identity crisis here. So I've got Clippers, Raptors, Bulls, Grizzlies, Pistons, Trailblazers, and the Atlanta Hawks. I'm almost to the point where I'm going to start advocating for Trey to get his butt out of Atlanta and demand a trade, because he's just too good to not really be playing with anyone else on his level. Kind of like what I was talking about with Tyrese Halliburton in Indiana, but the Pacers have a much better roster. Not that Atlanta doesn't have good players, but their skill players have not hit. Their draft picks have not hit over the last few years. And Atlanta, they're in an identity crisis. Their only identity is Trae Young. DeJounte Murray was nice, very nice pickup, great addition. I'm glad they got someone who can really play at a high level, but their identity is Trae Young, and that's not fair to him or to them. So I don't know what the Hawks are. I don't think they know what they are outside of Trae Young. The Trailblazers, they're young. Scoot Henderson, he's figuring it out as a rookie, hasn't really popped yet. So they're not winning games, and they're clearly losing the Dame divorce so far. Detroit, it's really unfortunate what's happening in Detroit so far. I think they've lost like 16 games in a row or something, 2-17 in their first 19 games, and they've lost 16 in a row. I think a lot of us like Cade Cunningham a lot. I had noticed, I don't know why Jaden Ivey hadn't been playing a lot. Monty Williams hasn't been playing him a lot for Detroit. I don't know what that's about, but the Pistons have struggled to be competitive for a while. It just seemed like they might have something, right, with a new competent head coach in there who empowers players, and with a strong lead guard in Cade, who was hurt mostly last year, and we get to see more of him now. I thought Cade and Ivy were the backcourt for them, like stamped going forward. They certainly have an identity crisis when you're losing 16 games in a row. I put the Grizzlies in here. I know we don't really know what they're going to be until Ja Morant comes back, which should be soon, right? 25 games. It should be in the next couple weeks. We should see Ja Morant back, so that should be cool. Again, it's probably not fair to even like judge them or label them until we see Ja back and we see what they are. Just the fact that Ja Morant has to come back from all that stuff, and then they have to kind of reinvent themselves. A little bit of a different team now. Marcus Smart, Derrick Rose, like they're trying to put it together. Marcus Smart got hurt recently, I saw. So they're really going to have to figure out who they are, and they've taken a step back now. The last few years, Memphis was one of the favorites in the West, one of the top teams in the West. So Grizzlies, identity crisis for now. The Bulls, I mean, when your best players are basically when we're just waiting to find out where your best players are going to get traded to, because that's the only use we have for the good talent you have on your team, is like, let's get them somewhere where they can matter. Yeah, the Bulls are pretty self-explanatory. The Raptors, who I have a lot of respect for, and I love Scotty Barnes. I love Pascal Siakam. He's another big time prospect that people like, potential trade prospect that people are like, let's get him out of there and get him to a contender and see what he can really do to help a really good team. You don't really know who the Raptors are right now or who they're going to be soon, because it could be very different soon and it could change, but we'll see. The Clippers, they are an identity crisis because the James Harden thing, I was shocked that they were even interested. I get having more star power, more offense. Like, you need that in basketball. You need your stars, you need your offense, but it's like that. It's like I've been talking about kind of on this episode with certain teams, like, the Pacers, the Kings, the Timberwolves, the Knicks. Teams, there are so many teams with good rosters. They may have one like star or standout player or talent, but you respect their culture. They can win games. They're versatile. They're deep. You might have more faith in like a Pacers team than the Clippers, who have way more individual talent than a team like the Pacers, multiple Hall of Famers. I kept saying when it first came out that the Clippers were even interested in James Harden, I said, number one, I think we all can attest to the fact that we think Ty Lue knows what he's doing as an NBA head coach. He must have vouched for James Harden at some level to at least say, like, I can see how this can work. Let me try this. Like, I would want to see what this looks like. I would want to go for this. If Ty Lue felt like that was something that he felt like he could make work, then that I felt like that had to be at least part of it. Like, Ty Lue had to sign off on it. I want to give it more time. They started out like 0-6 or 0-7, of course, with Harden. We like writing stuff off quickly, making quick decisions, quick assumptions and speculations, and quick hot takes, and then just giving it a rest. It's like, I do want to give the Clippers some more time. They keep trying these things, right? It was Kawhi and Paul George. They brought in Westbrook. Now they brought in Harden. Like, they keep trying things. And to me, that's a big sign of an identity crisis. Like, the Clippers are probably the team that could fluctuate the most on the spectrum throughout the season. They're probably the one team that could be a championship contender one day and have an identity crisis in 2 weeks, and then move into a competitive thorn, come February, and then right before the playoffs, have them as a fringe contender. Like, the Clippers probably have the most fluctuation ability on the spectrum, just because they're so unpredictable. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Basketball Society podcast. Stay tapped in for more episodes where we'll update the NBA spectrum and talk about all things basketball all across the board. My name is Martin Soaries. Subscribe wherever you're listening from, and if you're on Apple Podcasts, please leave a rating and review of the show. That would be much love. Stay tapped in, and I'll talk to you guys next time.